amidst a very tumultuous week with regards to our political climate, who doesn't want to see a movie about a abductor slash serial killer who's got multiple personalities? I went to go see Split today, the M. Night Shyamalan movie that has been making the rounds at I think a couple of film festivals starting in September, and was getting some pretty positive reviews and kind of saying this is the return to form for M. Night in his directing, because let's face it, a couple of his last couple of movies haven't been the best, and it seems like this new kind of collaboration he's taken up with Blumhouse and kind of producing lower budget type of horror and suspense movies for that label has kind of turned things around a little bit for him. The Visit, I remember, I think it was last year, got a lot of good reviews as well, and this, I was curious to see what kind of Shyamalan I was going to get in this sitting. If I was going to get, you know, somewhat quirky but still very kind of evocative and suspenseful type of directing and writing, or if I was going to get the unintentionally hilarious type of Shyamalan movie, you know, The Happening, or how sometimes Lady in the Water is like that so bad it's good type film and just pure batshit. And that's the thing, you can't really fault the guy for not trying. When it comes to his own original ideas and properties, he goes big, and you know, sometimes those ideas, The Village, doesn't hit the landing quite right. Sometimes it really does. Unbreakable, for me, really hits that mark really well. Kind of a great pioneer with regards to superhero movies before superhero movies became the norm. I was really curious to see what I was going to get with this movie, and I'm happy to say that I feel this is very much a good return to form for M. Night. This is a really taut, really well-paced, brilliantly acted horror suspense film that just kind of builds up moment by moment, and you know, ends up like intensifying more and more, but you're along with it, or at least I was along with it. Other audience members, maybe it takes a little bit of a stretch, but then I feel it all pays off in the end, and there will be a spoiler section of this. I feel I can't properly talk about this movie without addressing where it goes and why I feel that works. Out of the way here right now, this film has been met with a little bit of controversy surrounding its portrayal of its main character, Kevin, and the several different personalities that inhabit his character. And so there has been a little bit of talk about how this is still very much portraying the stigma of mental illness, how this is still very much, you know, painting people with dissociative identity disorder or multiple personalities and people with severe mental illnesses in a very negative and not complimentary light. The fact that the character is a character who suffers from this disorder, yeah, can automatically in some people's minds right out of the gate put that stigma on there. But I have to say that with certain subject matter, with certain movies, and depending on your familiarity kind of going in with the context of the way it's going to be presented, is that you have to learn to let go of the real world a little bit when you go into a movie. Because there have been movies like this before that have dealt with this issue, whether it's through and throughout, or whether it's a reveal like it is in things like Psycho or Identity, for example. In that has been kind of the gimmick of the story to work, is that the character suffers from some kind of mental disorder or mental illness. You know what? I'm mature enough and responsible enough, and I will say educated enough, to know that this isn't the be-all end-all for every single individual who suffers from some kind of mental disorder. If you choose to completely just buy into the idea, or completely just get outraged at the idea that the director's intent is to portray everybody in one kind of all-encompassing stereotype, then either you haven't been out to movies much for the sake of escapist fantasy, or you need just to lighten up or get educated for yourself. I know perfectly well that there are people who do horrible things out there that aren't attributed to, you know, the fact that they have multiple personalities, or to the fact that they are suffering from some kind of mental illness. I'm well aware of the fact that sometimes a mental illness isn't even the primary factor in what goes on through a person's actions sometimes. It doesn't waste time in this movie. It sets up your plot within the first 5 minutes really quick. 3 teenage girls are abducted by this Kevin character played by James McAvoy, and it's revealed that you go in knowing that he is going to be exhibiting different behaviors and different personalities throughout the film. So you go in knowing this. So if you're not able to kind of let go of that from the onset, then this probably isn't the film for you. And yeah, to each your own. If you don't want to go see a film like this, then that's fine. But I feel I'm mature enough to know, like, yes, this is going to go into a very fantastical and exaggerated version of the world. It's this, I'm like, this isn't meant to be taken seriously in my eyes. This is just kind of, again, the gimmick utilized to get a suspenseful and horrific movie going. But I'm gonna give it to this. McAvoy does a phenomenal job here. He's given a tour de force of acting here, and he's just a tornado in the way that he can just switch out of these various mannerisms and these various behaviors, and frankly be so convincing in that he is a separate character without any extra things going on like makeup or CGI even. Like there's a little bit of CGI when his more visceral personality, the emerging personality known as the Beast, takes place, but it's kind of just surface type of CGI. It's nothing really to thoroughly transform him to make it seem like, well, that's weird. I still believe that this is the same character, but it's just so effective in how he can change on a dime like that. He is able to convey this very pragmatic and reserved personality, this very hoity-toity, almost well-mannered Mary Poppins-ish type of personality, able to play kind of this very wide-eyed, innocent kid behavior at times, and then when the Beast finally comes around, like, he can thoroughly convince you that he is just all animal instinct at that point. It is something to behold, honestly. And if you're just a fan of really great acting, I'd recommend this movie for you for McAvoy alone. It's so many little things, like the fact that one personality is OCD, so you'll see him kind of fidgeting with something, or a little behavior here or there is kind of a signal that something's up, or a simple affectation like his I think the personality's name is Patricia, like how Patricia likes to kind of wrap herself up in a frock of some kind from time to time, is that it like as soon as you see him kind of take on that kind of subtle gesture of doing this with whatever he's wearing, you get that, okay, here now it's Patricia's time, and something as subtle as a change in his eyebrow arch. Like, it's not the Rock people's eyebrow type of extravagance, but it's just subtle enough that when he's having a conversation with someone and his therapist, and she is basically calling him out, essentially saying, like, I know this isn't the personality I'm supposed to be talking to, who are you? And like this subtle arch in his eyebrow, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's Dennis, that's the Dennis personality. Like, he is so good at the details, but at the same time he doesn't get lost in them. Like, you feel like this is a fully fleshed out set of characters. The turns he takes from kind of humorous at times to reassuring and comforting almost, to just pants-crappingly terrifying. There's plenty more in this movie that for you to kind of relish in. Anna Taylor-Joy, she played the eldest daughter in The Witch, which was one of my favorite movies from last year, by the way. And she plays one of the teenage girls in this bunker that he's got them held captive in. Well, you think it's a bunker, but then Shyamalan twists. Her character's name is Casey, and all the girls do a really good job. I mean, the other two are very good at not getting too much into the hysterical, terrified trope of a horror film. Like, they have their own moments of resourcefulness. I'm appreciative of that all the girls don't suddenly go to pieces, or that one girl's always like in a constant panic or fidget. Like, they all have their little moments to kind of show off that, yeah, they're trying to figure things out for themselves. They're trying to get out of this situation for themselves. Are they terrified? Sure, but then each of them in their own way, shape, or form kind of get it together from time to time. But Anna Taylor-Joy's character, I'd say, is obviously the focus of the struggle for the most part, and her story is just it's disturbing and kind of endearing too at times, because you really do root for these characters to get out of this situation, and you root for her character especially when you see there's glimpses into her past of what she's experienced in her family. And it, for a PG-13 movie, it implies a lot of disturbing stuff in her past. So when it comes back to her having to interact with James McAvoy in whatever personality he's inhabiting at the time, you really root for her to make it out of this, because she is demonstrating, I mean, she's portraying some vulnerability, but she seems the most calm, collected. She's very resourceful. She is very kind of together with, okay, I'm going to turn the tables on this guy. You know, she's talking to the little kid personality and treating him like a little kid, essentially, and manipulating him to kind of see if she can work her way out of this. But the way you would try to manipulate a little kid, probably, with regards to kind of like bargains and being like, hey, he invites her to his room to want to listen to his Kanye West CDs, and she's like, yeah, sounds like fun, because he happened to mention that there's a window there. And so, you know, she's thinking like, I'm going to use that as a chance to maybe escape through the window. But she plays it up like, she says at one point, she's like, I'm here to help you. Like, imagine I'm your favorite babysitter. Like, I just want what's best for you. It's fun to see James McAvoy just tear into this material, but it's also fun to see Anna Taylor-Joy go toe-to-toe with him on this. Like, all the acting throughout the movie is really good, but these two especially, the dynamic between these two actors is so brilliant and so well developed that I can buy this teenage girl standing up to this monster, essentially. And again, that goes to M. Night's pacing of the movie. It trims a lot of the fat of previous attempts he's had in horror movies. It gets back to kind of the stuff of Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and a little bit of Signs, in that there's no unnecessary tangents, really. There's no unnecessary waste of characters. The therapist plays a pretty integral role, not just in expositing what's going on with Kevin, but also you get that she is like a sympathetic voice for him. She is the one person probably in this entire movie who's rooting for Kevin to succeed in maintaining some degree of control in his life. Even though she's not fully aware of what he's doing outside of the sessions, she has the idea, and she does a lot of the investigating and a lot of the kind of reaching in there and trying to salvage something of this character. So it doesn't feel like a waste whenever we spend time with her. It doesn't feel like we're just hearing exposition. It feels like there is some kind of very important character stuff developing between these two. Here's where I would say stop if you want to just go see the movie based off of what I've said before this point. Because like I said right at the beginning, I can't properly explain what works in this movie for me with regards to this particular situation without talking a little bit about what the reveals are. I had a feeling of where it was going because I didn't know much. I mean, aside from the basic premise of this individual with multiple personalities abducting 3 girls for some nefarious purpose, I did not know exactly what else would be entailed. I'd heard rumblings that this was a spiritual successor or spiritual sequel to one of M. Night's previous movies. Kind of in the way 10 Cloverfield Lane was a somewhat spiritual sequel to the original Cloverfield. And that's what I thought it was going, is that I was going to address similar themes with regards to extraordinary people or people with abilities and what that would be like in a real world or semi-real world context. The same way 10 Cloverfield Lane talks about kind of these weird sci-fi aspects taking place in our everyday world, but we see them from the everyman perspective. I was prepared for this movie to not be set so much in the real world. In other words, I was expecting something supernatural to occur towards the end, and something supernatural does occur towards the end. McAvoy's transformation into the Beast personality is not your just regular, like, oh, it's all in the mind. No, it's a physical transformation. Like I said, there's a little bit done. He's impervious to certain degrees of pain, more so than a regular human would be. He's scaling walls, super strength, cannibalism. It's all this just out there exaggerations of a human in a way. And when that started happening, I began to kind of feel like, okay, I think I know what is going on even beyond this, even beyond just that initial transformation. And sure enough, at the very end of this movie, again, spoilers, when McAvoy is inspecting himself and his wounds, and how his wounds are kind of like either minimal or they're healing rapidly, and he's conversing with himself and conversing with his other malevolent personalities about like, I can't wait to show the world what we're capable of, essentially. You start to hear these familiar notes from, again, my favorite M. Night movie. You start to hear the familiar melody start to play in the background, and I immediately am like, I thought so. I thought so. Cut to diner, cut to news anchor on TV talking about how this serial killer is going about now calling himself the Horde, because that's what Kevin refers to his whole group of personalities coalescing in him is the Horde. And I'm like, okay, here we are with a fancy, kind of overly dramatic, almost superhero-ish name, or super villainish name. People in diner saying, this reminds me a lot of that dude in the wheelchair from 15 years ago. He had a fancy name too. What was it called? Cut to Bruce Willis sitting at diner being like, his name was Mr. Glass. I knew it. Shyamalan, or however you say his name, is trying to Marvel Cinematic Universe himself. For those of you who are still lost, again, spoilers galore, Bruce Willis returns as his character from Unbreakable, which I said was kind of playing in the real-world context of superpowers, down-to-earth superpowers. And he's referencing Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass, obviously. I know some people might be like, oh, M. Night, pandering galore. But I feel, honestly, if this was something he would sincerely think about making a shared universe type of film series, this is the one that would work. It, in a way, kind of rationalizes the reason why the premise relies so heavily on a character with dissociative identity disorder. Because in this universe, while it is just a shade off from what would be considered the real world for us, it is talking about how humanity here and there, like mutants, but not to the X-Men level of things, has slowly begun to kind of evolve in certain ways. In Bruce Willis's case, he has a heightened kind of immune system, a heightened invulnerability, save for the weakness of water. And it's a more downplayed version of a superpower. In the case of Samuel L. Jackson's Mr. Glass, he is very fragile, and that plays into kind of the huge chip on his shoulder, and why he sees himself as a villain is because he is extremely fragile to physical harm. In the case of Kevin in this movie, this is talking about not just a behavioral or a mental transformation or change in an individual. It's also addressing, like, what if the two are linked? What if there was some kind of connection between, you know, our brain and our body chemistry, and how we can be able to basically change ourselves on a whim. Now, is he doing, like, you know, X-Men levels of things, like popping claws or having optic blasts come out of his eyes? No, it's a very grounded kind of version of a superpower. Again, he goes through some kind of physical transformation that in some way can heighten his agility, not to, you know, Superman levels, but to, I'd say, very well-trained athlete levels. He's got this invulnerability, kind of, sort of. He still gets hurt, but it's a matter of him being able to overcome injuries, much in the way Bruce Willis does, more so than a regular human being would. Throwing it into the context of the unbreakable world, or the unbreakable universe, makes sense. And it makes sense why they would go with a case of DID that is so extremely exaggerated, because it's talking about how his own abilities are amplifying these personalities, are amplifying the disorder. It doesn't try to have any assumptions that it's taking place in any semblance of our reality at that point. And that's the whole thing about Shyamalan, is that he's always out to kind of trick his audience a little bit. He'll start off saying, oh yeah, this is taking place in everyday mundane Philadelphia, but then, you know, he'll twist it ever so much to say, like, no, here's what's really happening. And if you go into this movie kind of just expecting, like, a down-to-earth thriller. It doesn't go that route, but at the same time I wasn't disappointed that it didn't. The fact that he is kind of streamlined his storytelling more so. The fact that he has a more limited budget and does away with a lot of the superfluous stuff, I feel is a big benefit to his craft. The fact that he has powerhouses of acting, like I said, Anna Taylor-Joy and James McAvoy, working so brilliantly off of each other, and McAvoy sometimes working brilliantly off of himself. It's a testament to the idea that he is coming back to being a strong filmmaker. I hope that he maintains this course. I hope that he stares clear away from biting off more than he can chew. I hope that the Will and Jaden Smiths of the world don't wrangle him into another pure nepotism project. I am recommending this movie. I'm recommending Split. It's a legitimately good January horror movie, in my opinion. Whether it'll be on my best of list of this year, who's to say? It's just the beginning of the month and the beginning of a long haul for us in so many ways that I'll just have to wait and see. But I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed what it kind of represented for the filmmaker. I enjoyed the performances. And I felt the payoff to the twist was well worth it. There you go. Go see Split. Have a safe weekend. And I'll be back with more movies as the weeks progress.